Hello, hello. YouTube says we're live. We'll find out if that's true. This is behind the scenes of AV Rant. We're recording our live streaming session as Tom and I talk to one another. So if there's technical glitches, they'll show up in this version because this is just the live feed. There's a completed version that I put together, go up on Thursdays typically, and that one has cleaned up audio for sure, and then timestamps down in the show notes so you can skip around questions. But this one is just the live feed. You've been warned. All right. If Tom can manage to not be so bleary-eyed as to be able to see the questions, he can
I will try.
Start when he pleases.
I will endeavor to soldier on. I have to rub all this out of my eyes. I know all you people are like, don't touch your face. Listen.
Well, no, don't touch your face with unwashed hands. There is that little end of the sentence.
I think it's too late. I think my eyes are just going to be like this for the first 15 minutes of the podcast. All right. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And some eagle-eyed folks might notice that this Q&A episode is 696, and the last Q&A episode was 694. What could have happened
it's
to 695?
the mystery of the lost episode. It's the mystery.
You'll find out the answer momentarily, but we're going to tease it out for a little bit. Or maybe not. I don't know.
Like
whatever Tom wants to do.
Off, though. It's okay. It's like one of those things you're like, oh, so it was a dream all along, was it? Thank you, Dallas. This is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to avrant.com. Leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast. YouTube.com/AVRant. You can contact Rob directly at rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is at FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom. And I have tweeted recently. Not this week, but... because I started tweeting again, my phone now thinks that I need to know when other people tweet, and it tells me all the time. So, yeah.
You can change that. There's a setting for notifications on Twitter.
So, I found out that if you just ignore Twitter long enough, it shuts up.
That too.
It just does. That's how it worked on my phone before. It's how it'll work again. I'll probably start tweeting again. We'll see. All right, let's start by thanking our listeners in the week. To become the listener of the week, you have to support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com, look into the right side of the page, and click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, just a coffee cup. It's hard to miss. Mm-hmm. That'll send you to a PayPal donation site where you can use your PayPal account or a credit card if you want to be more anonymous. Either way, we don't really know who you are. I don't think. I don't know. Anywho. So if you do that, we will mention you, and we want to mention Fred, who did that this week. So thank you very much, Fred.
Yes, indeed, Fred. Thank you so much for that PayPal donation. It's very much appreciated.
And if you prefer, you can go to patreon.com/AVRant podcast to sign up for a subscription, if you will, to our continuing support to our podcast, if you will. This will allow you to sign up, give them credit card information, and they will take a dollar amount out of your account every month and give most of it to us. A minimum of $1, maximum of infinity. So we want to thank our 113 patrons over at patreon.com. That's up from last week from 112. So thank you to all of our patrons.
Indeed. Patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you would like to sign up. Thanks so much to our 113 patrons over there for the ongoing support.
If you can't support us financially, especially in these trying COVID-19 times, we can completely understand. Mm-hmm. So if you do something that supports the podcast in any way, just let us know and we will mention you. So we will mention Nathan, who dropped a helpful note to Rob regarding the Atmos test tones that Rob made available to download as MKV files, which was what?
It was just a thing that it might be revealing more of my personal information than I wanted to. It honestly wasn't a big deal, but I appreciate that Nathan was looking out for me. That is doesn't go unnoticed, and I'm very grateful for that. So thank you, Nathan. Wanted to mention that.
There you go. Thanks, Nathan, for looking out for Rob. Mm-hmm. Brian, who bought some outdoor polk speakers from Accessories for Less, and he told them that we mention them all the time. So thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
And many folks have been sending us messages telling us that they appreciate us soldiering on with this podcast while everybody's locked up in their house, especially now that we skipped an episode, sort of. So we want to thank all those people, including Jeremy, Adam, Michael, Ryan, Anthony, and Neil. So thank you, gentlemen, and the ladies that support you.
And I'll say the names again: Jeremy, Adam, Michael, Ryan, Anthony, and Neil. And that's just me catching it when I notice it, and I am certain that other people have sent well wishes and messages of gratitude as well. So thank you to everybody. Our huge thanks to you for continuing to listen to AV Rant and keeping this community going. It's a fun thing to be able to enjoy and escape some other thoughts. You know.
So what's this? A bright side pool.
Oh, the Bright Side Home Theater podcast.
Yeah, what's that? What is it about? I mean, it's obviously about home theater, but what is it?
That's one of our listeners, DJ. It's his podcast that he hosts himself, where he just basically does reviews of what he's watching in his home theater. So it's not always the absolute latest movie; it's whatever he happens to be watching that week. So yes, you were invited, like, kind of vicariously onto the podcast via Facebook through someone else and whatnot. Anyway, I guess I'll forward you his Twitter, because that's the one. That's how I know how to get in touch with him.
I mean, he's got my email address. If he listens to this podcast, he could just email me.
Yep.
I mean, I guess apparently there's some talk about me maybe going on that podcast. Whatever. I might do that. If I do, I'll let you know. And you guys can go check it out. You should go check it out anyways. It doesn't no skin off my teeth. I certainly want to support all our other brother and sister podcasts that are in the home theater business out there. So yeah, go check them out. I suppose you've listened to it, Rob? Because nobody be offended when I say I haven't, because I don't even listen to this podcast.
I have listened.
Certainly not listening to my own.
I can't with honesty say I've listened to every single episode. That is not the case. Sorry. I used to be able to listen to more things in a week than I'm able to at the moment. So I haven't heard every episode, but I've listened to a few and I've enjoyed them. And yeah, I think you'll have a lot of fun talking to DJ if you go.
That sounds like it might be a thing that happens, or maybe not. All right. We've stretched this out long enough. So the missing podcast last night until the wee hours of the morning for poor Tom.
You.
Yes, the East Coast among us, who then had to get up and help his children with their stupid stuff, and then have to mow the lawn, and then my son.
My goodness. Jeez.
Had to go help outside the hospital, but not too close, so they could all wave at him and talk to him over a wall. So I was a little distracted today and didn't get my nap, which I needed to do in order for me to be up for this podcast. But last night we recorded a special podcast episode with Lee Overstreet. Those of you who are listening to this podcast long enough will have heard Lee's voice here before. He often subs for me when family or life obligations get in the way of me recording. SBS kindly sent him a pair of SB, that's sealed box 2000 Pro subs, to review. And not only do we talk about the subwoofers themselves, but also delve into Lee's experience of following our guidance on how to set up a single subwoofer and then how to set up dual subwoofers, plus a comparison of how things sounded going from no subs to one sub to two subs. And he went through the 12-step Rob setup program with the changing of the phase. For those of you that are familiar with that, if you're not, it's on the website. You can find it. And if you've ever wondered what it does to a person, you will now find out on this podcast.
That's right.
So that's coming up. When am I supposed to publish that one? On Friday? Will that be on?
I think I'm back. I'm sorry about that. Had a weird internet glitch thing, something to do with my router. I'm back. Hopefully you vamped in my absence.
I did not. I just let it sit nice and silent. I assumed you were talking.
Oh,
I always assume you're talking. Why would I not assume you're talking? Everyone else who's out there who are like, why am I listening to silence? It's because Rob's always talking. And I just assume, well, I'll just be quiet and let him finish.
Nope, had some weird thing where for some reason my router decided to hop between 2.4 and 5 gigahertz for a moment there. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. And I don't know. I guess we could edit our podcast for the first time in like 7 years, but probably not. Probably just be a gap in there in the audio only version.
That's not gonna happen.
Sorry
about that. Anyway, so yeah, Lee went through the 12-step program and came out the other side a changed man. So you'll find out all about that.
Yeah. Was I supposed to say more about that? I'm all befuddled now. No. In any case, that's $695, folks. If you were like, where's $695? It's Lee's review of dual SB 2000 Pro subs.
This is going to come out after that one.
I know.
You're literally talking to only the people that are up at late at night. This is silly. So we tease something that they've already listened to.
Maybe. I don't know what people do. Sometimes people jump around. Some of our numbers on YouTube are way out of whack with others, so I don't know how it all works.
All right, on to other things. Vincent T.O. from the HD TV Test teased on Twitter that he's reviewing the first consumer projector model that has Dolby Vision decoding. Speculation is that it is the, I feel like this is racist just saying this name, Changhong.
That's the brand name.
CHIQ B5U, whatever.
That's the model number.
It's an ultra short throw laser projector. What this tells me is that maybe it has a ultra short throw. You know, sometimes I mean they have very stiff requirements as to what screen it can be on in order to be able to do the
like some of the Hisense ones are actually bundled with a particular screen.
That's what I think is going to happen. We've been saying this for a long time about Dolby Vision and projectors, is that unless you can guarantee and know what screen's going to go with the projector and where the projector is going to, you'll be able to tell the distance or something like that. It's very hard to know to be able to do Dolby Vision. But if they bundle the short throw projector with a screen, then they will know. And the short throw can only go in a certain number of places because it's got to throw in that.
I mean, they still don't know your ambient light level, but
that's true. But they don't know that when you're got a direct view TV.
That's true as well. Yeah. So I guess they're making a go of it. I'm honestly surprised to see it. Vincent also, when he teased this on Twitter, he's like, I never expected to ever see a projector with Dolby Vision on it, but here he is reviewing one. So it isn't for certain that particular model number, but some people who are kind of in the know are like, well, that's the one he was going to review next, and that's the one he's talking about. So it seems like that might be it. We'll see when his review comes out on HD TV Test.
I can see Dolby Vision projectors existing.
I mean, they do in full-size theaters, in Dolby cinemas.
Right. And and it would have to be that sort of setup where it's like, it's a high-end projector anyways, and then it has a Dolby Vision mode that can only be enabled by a custom installer who can, do all the programming or whatever it has to do in order to make sure that it's actually doing Dolby Vision. Either that or having some sort of high-end light sensor in it that could measure or something. I don't know. All right, comments here. Andy on Facebook figured he'd share an image of his Atmos speaker layout. Not only did he go for 6 Atmos speakers as top front, top middles, and top rears, but he also connected all 3 pairs to 3 individual Dolby Pro Logic processors in order to create 3 central Dolby overhead God speaker signals. So he's got 9 overhead JBL THX speakers in total, plus what appears to be 3 pairs of side surrounds and a pair of surround backs, also all mounted up high. So there's it literally looks like CGI. It just doesn't. This looks like a rendering.
Looks like it was photoshopped.
It does. And what is the deal with all the foam? There's so much.
The entire side, back walls, and ceiling are covered with foam wherever it is not a speaker, and that's there's a significant amount that are speakers. Yeah. It's like it's a crown. It's a crown of speakers up there. Those aren't super cheap speakers either, though. So that's significant investment in above you sound. That's for darn sure.
I can't imagine what that sounds like, to be honest with you. It's got to get a little muddled up there, I would think, but he seems to like it.
He says that the panning effects are as smooth as they can be, and I
would imagine so.
There's some. I can understand that in the sense that we don't stereo image very well anywhere but basically in front of us. That's where our ears and brain stereo image well. Everywhere else, we kind of do better if the sound is actually coming from the location where, the program wants the sound to be coming from. We're not very good at using 2 or 3 speakers to sort of, locate a sound somewhere in between them anywhere than directly in front of us. So there's potentially some justification for that. Even I won't be going that far, Andy. You have outdone me in how many speakers you're willing to put on your ceiling.
But the cray and the crazy there. That comes to home theater. That around here we can appreciate things like that.
Yes,
so
we can.
More luck to you, buddy. All right, here, get some questions in here. Dennis. Dennis has an Onkyo TX RZ730 that he's using to power that's a receiver, by the way, that he's using to power a 5.2.4 setup, including clip speakers for the floor level, a pair of SVS 2000 Pro series subs. He didn't mention what his 4 overhead speakers are, so also doesn't seem to mention if he's got sealed boxes or
didn't mention to me in
boxes
email
or anything. Yeah. Anyways, he's got an older Yamaha RX-V665 receiver on hand. He says he would like to lessen the load on his Onkyo, which is currently powering all 9 speakers by itself. He says he would like to use the Yamaha to either power his height speakers or his front speakers, but he also used the word biamps, and it wasn't 100% clear from his email exactly what he tends to do. Don't biamp. Let's start right there. Don't do that part.
I mean, I don't actually think he meant biamping, which is using
right.
2 separate amplifier channels to power 1 speaker. It didn't seem, I think when he used the word biamp, I think what he meant was I have 2 amplifiers that are, powering my system as a whole. But I think that's what again, it wasn't 100% clear in his email. What it mostly seemed clear is that he, instead of having the Onkyo power all 9 speakers by itself, that he would use a second amplifier to probably power his front left-right speakers, maybe his left center right, if that's doable, or maybe all 4 of his overhead speakers, and then the Onkyo continues to power the 5 traditional floor-level speakers. Seemed to be what he wanted.
So he found the pre-outs on the back of his Onkyo, but he says he's confused as to the best way to connect them to his Yamaha. Can we sort things out for him? So, yes, on this, excuse me, on his Onkyo, he's got, what is that, Rob? Jeez. I don't know how you...
Like I should know. I think it was a frog in your throat is what it was.
I'm going to drown that frog with this water here. But so he's got a full set of pre-outs on this Onkyo, which is good. So, and the Yamaha has, oh my God, I can't see this. Does he have ins? It's got outs.
It actually does have multi-channel ins. It's got a 7.1 analog multi-channel inputs on the back of his older Yamaha. So, I mean, he has no intention of like having the Yamaha power all 9 speakers. It can't anyway. It's a 7-channel model. But I mean, you actually have total freedom here because on the back of your Onkyo, so right now, I mean, well, first of all, you don't actually need to do this whatsoever because 5 Klipsch speakers as your floor level speakers are using a tiny amount of power.
Right. There's no load. There's not a lot of load that you need to be lessening on.
Right.
I mean, the Klipsch are one of the most efficient speakers that exist. You really have to go pretty esoteric to get much more efficient than Klipsch to begin with. And then you have subwoofers that are taking care of all the low end anyways.
That's right.
So therefore, how much are those Klipsch calling for at any given time?
And even if your 4 overhead speakers are not as efficient as your Klipsch speakers, one, they're closer to you physically because they're just on your ceiling. And second, Atmos speakers don't get nearly as much content to play and no bass whatsoever. So the load that you're actually asking of your Onkyo receiver right now, even though it's powering 9 speakers, because the speakers you have are so efficient, I mean, you really don't need to do this. But we can still put that aside and answer the question as is, because some people could benefit more from this potentially, and hey, maybe it's just something you want to do. So
he's got the Yamaha sitting around anyways.
That's right.
And it's literally as easy as those telephone operators almost. Yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, it's that easy. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go into your Yamaha because that's the older one, the one that you're going to use as a dumb amp. You want to go factory reset or just kill everything back to
that's a good idea.
0.
Yeah, factory reset, no settings in there. Yep.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you've got no room correction on it whatsoever. You've got no trim level set other than at 0 on any of the speakers. Then you want to take your volume knob and you want to turn it up to 0 or whatever the equivalent is if it's got one of those random numbers that they sometimes do, which is probably not the case. You turn the volume knob up there and then make sure if there's some setting in there that allows you to make sure that it turns it back on at the same volume
every single time.
Off.
Yeah.
Yes.
Once you have picked a volume level on the Yamaha receiver, which is just acting as an amplifier in this scenario, once you've picked a volume level, you want it to stay there all the time. You never want to change.
Off.
You never want to change the volume on the Yamaha ever again. And one other thing you'll actually want to do in this scenario is have all of the speakers in the Yamaha set to large, because you
Right.
don't want to be applying any filters. You don't want to be applying any equalization. You want nothing being applied to the Yamaha. It's just acting as a straight through amplifier.
Right.
Once you've done that, you will set the Yamaha to its analog multi-channel input.
Right.
It's usually just called multi-in. That's the input that it's going to be set to. And now it's as simple as whatever speakers you want to power externally, you take those pre-outs on your Onkyo. You don't have to change anything in the settings. What's coming out of the Onkyo, the pre-outs are always hot and always ready to send a signal. So you unplug the speaker wires from the Onkyo. You take pre-out RCA cables from the Onkyo. You plug them into the corresponding analog multi-channel inputs on the Yamaha, and now you plug the speaker wire into the Yamaha, and now you have a separate amplifier for those speakers.
You're literally you don't even have to really do that. I mean, you could just go put them to the fronts or put them to the surround back. It doesn't even matter because the receiver doesn't care. It's going to take the preamps. Just make sure you put the speaker wire to the correct one.
Well, yeah.
On the Yamaha. That's all that matters.
Yep.
So if you say, okay, I'm going to power my top middles with this, just say,
Sure.
top middles. So you take the pre-outs from your top middles and you put them into your front left and right on the Yamaha.
On the Yamaha, could be.
Right.
If those are the only two you're doing, that you might do that.
You could do that, and then you take the speaker wire off of your Onkyo and you take it to your front left and right.
Yeah.
Speaker wire on the terminals on your Yamaha there, and that's it. Because it doesn't matter. Now, if you take those preamps, those cables, and you take them out of the front left and right, and you're like, oh no, it's freaking me out. I got to put them in something else. Well, then so you put them over into, does it have something else?
It's got surrounds and surround backs.
So you put it into surrounds instead.
Sure.
It will literally make no difference. There's not more amplifier going to the front left and right than there is to anything else. It's all the same. So yeah, you've now got, what does this thing have? It looks like 7 channels of amplification on this Yamaha. Is that what I'm guessing?
That's what the Yamaha's got. Yep.
So now you've got 7 channels that you can use in there. But again, why?
You don't need to.
Are you sitting 23 feet away from those clipses? Because then maybe I can understand. But if you're not, then
I
don't have. I mean, you might get up to 5 watts, maybe 10. Who knows? So, all right. Have fun with that, buddy. Let us know how it works out for you. Joe is looking to install 4 Atmos speakers, but he has restrictions for where in-ceiling speakers can be located. The best proposal was for 2 of the speakers to basically be directly above the back of his L-shaped couch, i.e. top middles, for his main listening position, and then 2 more in-ceiling speakers would go in front of those, but only about 4.5 feet. So one would be kind of behind your head, just basically right at the back of your head.
Yeah.
Right on the back of the
slightly behind you, but basically directly above you. That'd be one pair.
And the other pair would be like if you kicked your feet out on the like a reclining chair, it would then be where your toes are. That's about the distance there.
Yeah.
So Joe has Paradigm Prestige speakers, and the proposal was to get the matching Paradigm E80 speakers, $650 each for the top middles, and the E80A, $750 each as the top fronts. Since the E80A have the 30-degree angle built into them, what are our thoughts? I sometimes think this I sometimes think that we just watched Groundhog Day, and I'm already kind of feeling like Groundhog Day, and I feel like we just answered this question like 2 weeks ago. I feel like that, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, we have definitely talked about so this whole thing about having angled in-ceiling speakers.
Yeah.
I mean, the general advice, and this is Dolby's advice, not ours, we're just parroting what Dolby says, is
the people who invented it. Yes.
That's right. What they want you to have are in-ceiling speakers that have wide dispersion. They're looking for in-ceiling speakers that have 90 degree in every direction dispersion. So 45 degrees out to each side, 90-degree dispersion in all directions, and they want those at 45-degree elevation angles, ideally in front of you and behind you. That would be the absolute ideal, but firing straight down. No angle, nothing, just firing straight down. That's Dolby's recommendation. Now, There are certain exceptions, like, say, Martin Logan's in-ceiling speakers or Golden Ear's in-ceiling speakers that have highly directional tweeters, ones that do not have even 90-degree dispersion in all directions. They have fairly wide dispersion in one direction, but very narrow dispersion in the other. And for those particular kind of speakers, it can sometimes be beneficial if the in-ceiling speaker itself is angled so that you are staying within the cone of dispersion of that much more narrow dispersion type of speakers. But the Paradigms do not fall into that category. They have very nice, even wide dispersion, and the speakers you're talking about are not very far in front of you. They're probably not even a 45-degree elevation angle. They're probably more like that 50-55
tilt. It's going to like...
they're going to start firing behind you. It's totally unnecessary. Now, I mean, the placement itself, while it doesn't adhere to Dolby's ideal placements, they're actually fine. 4.5 feet in front of you is within where top fronts should be. Now, you're going to have to label yours as front heights if you label the ones that are straight up above you as top middles, or you could call the ones that are straight above you top rears and the ones that are down by your feet as top fronts. It's not really going to change too much if you label them that way. But I don't have a huge problem with their placement, but absolutely do not get the angled ones.
No.
But then even more than that.
More than that, don't even get these at all. Can I just say that?
Prestige series.
So expensive.
This is
my God.
Expensive for non-ideally placed, not badly placed, but non-ideally placed. And then just Atmos speakers full stop do not need to be anywhere near this good. Now, I have no problem with you sticking with Paradigm.
Sure.
Just go way down in the family lineup to like their cheapest in-ceiling speakers.
Whatever it is. I literally do not care.
Those are totally fine for Atmos.
Could be boat speakers for all I care. I mean, whatever you can find on sale. I mean, if it has to be Paradigm. I mean, overhead speakers, so in my theater, I have the SVS prime elevation speakers, the angled ones, and I have them because I have some on my front wall, which angled is kind of the way you got it when you want to go with that. But then my middles are actually to the sides of my couch,
right?
And it's just because I have a fan and I can't get anything up there. So, in that case, I have no problems paying for something, paying extra for something in that gives you functionality that you couldn't get. Or in order to overcome an obstacle, you have the ability to have in-ceiling speakers. Now, if it were me, I would buy the Monoprice or whatever the cheapest thing that Rob is now recommending these days. But I say again to you, you have non-optimally placed speakers. Is it because they're in the ceiling instead of on the ceiling? Is it because you could have put them on if you could put them to the sides of your couches on the walls and have it be more like a use the elevation speakers to the sides? Is that what the problem is? Because if that's the case, then there are options for you out there that do not require you to have such, and it would still cost a heck of a lot less than $650 a pop.
But I mean, even if you're just like Paradigm in ceilings, if you go down the lineup, they have much more affordable options.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I it's probably coming from a Paradigm dealer. You don't necessarily want to, gyp them out of a sale and all that. But yeah, it does not need to be the Prestige series. It does not need to be $650 each. And definitely, no matter what you do, don't get the angled ones.
No angles. Especially not for $100 more a pop.
Mm.
Ryan invested in a pair of Focal Professional Shape 65 monitors. Professional Shape. What does that mean?
Shape is the series. That's just what they
kind of sounds like
series.
They've been working out and they'd like to brag about it a little bit. Are they also vegan? Just every time they turn, they go, "I'm in shape and I'm vegan." In case you're wondering, you weren't wondering, but I'm going to tell you anyways. Twice. During every sentence. Focal Professional Shape 65 monitors for his desktop setup, and he's now ruined for most other speakers. He's gotten used to their accurate sound with flat frequency response and extremely low distortion. and they're vegan. So he is now trying to decide which speakers to buy for his home theater setup. Have you thought about Focal?
Well,
He's considered simply getting 3 more Shape 65 monitors. They're $1,000 each for his LCR, but his Focal manual specifically says they were designed for listening a distance of 1 meter. That is, home theater setup is about 9 feet away, which is greater than 1 meter, even in America. That's true. It's true. We measure it the same as everybody else. So we looked at Focal's passive speaker lineup, and the Aria 900 series appears to use the same drivers as the Shape 65 monitors. The Aria 906 bookshelf speakers normally go for $1,000 each, but even though they don't have amplifiers built in like the Shape 65s do, but the accessories for less sells them for $500. Going any higher in Focal's lineup would mean a big jump in price, but Ryan also has to admit he's very curious about the Ascend Sierra 2 or the Sierra 2 EX, and his wife actually prefers the way the Ascend Sierra speakers look. So what should he get? I'm sorry, did your wife say she likes speakers? Those are the one you buy.
Now,
you lost your mind?
We've got to be fair. They go for $1,500 a pair instead of, if you shop at accessories for less, the Focals are $1,000 a pair. But he was considering speakers that were $1,000 each.
Right.
So the Sierra 2s are half the price of the $1,000 each. But if you were to get the Aria 906 or Aria 906 from Focal, they are $500 each if he gets them from accessories for less. So, I mean, can't really go wrong with those.
There's not a bad option in what you've given us.
Bad option out of any of
to
these.
buying the speakers that your wife didn't say she liked. That's the only bad option you have in front of you. Dude, I can't I mean, if you need any more marital advice, just Tom at avrant.com. I'll help you out, bro. And the answer is what she said. Because that's almost, I mean, in this case, your wife comes to you and says, I really like these itty bitty cube speakers, buy some of these. Then you and I can have a conversation about how we can change your mind. But she's saying, I like the way these look better. And they're really nice speakers.
Very nice.
All of these speakers are accurate.
Yes.
All of these speakers are at least designed to have a flat frequency response. Now, you have been sitting a foot away or a couple of feet away from desktop speakers that are very expensive, and you get very direct sounds. And in many ways, the room doesn't have a chance to do much to it before it gets to your ears. So taking those speakers, those exact speakers, and try to push them far away. It's good that you're not trying to convince us that that's what you want to do because they're not designed for that. But you're going to now have very accurate speakers no matter which ones of these you buy, and you're putting them in a room and you're sitting farther away from them. That's going to create a much different experience, and hopefully one that'll be just as good, if not better. But we won't know until we get everything set up in here, and then we start talking about room acoustics and everything else. But there is literally no bad choice in any of these speakers.
I mean, I will tell you, because in Ascend's lineup, the Sierra 2 EX is a bit more expensive than the Sierra 2. It really was mostly about even higher power handling and even higher output, which at 9 feet of distance you do not need. Right. So you don't need to pay more to get the Sierra 2 EX. I would have you get the regular Sierra 2. So that is the $1,500 price point. So that much I can make that decision for you. I mean, could you use the self-powered Shape 65 monitors from 9 feet away? You almost certainly could. I mean, Focal on the professional side is being 100% honest in that with the built-in amplifiers that they have, you will not hit full reference volume from more than a meter away. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. They're saying that at a meter away, these will hit full reference volume. That's what they were designed to do. They're meant to be studio monitors. If you go farther away than that, then you're some little distance below reference volume. Right. And if you were 15 feet away, you'd be well below it. So there's that. And price-wise, there's not really much reason to consider them either. So I mean, the 906s are the driver complement is very, very similar. The passive version.
Yeah, I understand that. People look at that like, oh, it looks like it's got the same drivers. It must sound the same. That means nothing. In this lineup, it probably means something. In the fact that it's all coming from the same
Well, yeah, and
manufacturer.
Focal
and
actually makes their own drivers as well,
Right.
so
The
there's
fact that,
similarities there.
yeah, but when you look at like drivers, even within sometimes the same line, same manufacturer, and they're making their own drivers or whatever, the application makes so much and makes a big difference. So we can't just look at drivers and say, oh, it has the same drivers, therefore it's going to have it's a similar sound. It isn't necessarily the case. So in this case, it's probably an okay assumption, but I would say that with the grills on and never having seen the drivers, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, I would
Sure.
say, this Focal speaker sounds good. Would this one also sound good? Yeah, probably. And never have to look at a driver in order to say that.
But I mean, Ascend does not pay shipping both ways. In fact, they charge
Right.
shipping both ways. So it's not completely free to try them out. But
Right.
if those are the ones that your wife likes the looks of better, and I mean, I will certainly vouch for the Sierra 2s all day long. 9 feet away, the Sierra 2s are more than capable. So yeah, both Tom and I are going to say, try out the Sierra 2s. If you absolutely hate them, send them back, get most of your money back. A little bit lost in shipping, but I don't think that's going to happen.
David from Bonnie, Scotland. Bonnie, Scott. I can't do it. I can't do any accents. I can do like geek. I can do like the D&D geek player from the 80s. That's my one accent I can do. So David is trying to choose between the Yamaha RXV 685, it's $500, and the RXA 680, which is $550. Ooh.
Now, see, I don't know exactly what the prices are in Scotland, so
Right.
I'm going by the U.S. prices.
Oh, those are the U.S. prices. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's before it's not accessories for less prices. Those are regular prices.
No, that's regular prices.
So he says they seem awfully close. Any particular reason to get one over the other? I mean, I don't have any idea.
So Yamaha's done this really weird thing over the past couple of years. They release the Avantage, which is the RXA series.
Series, right.
They always release those first, and then a few months later, they release the RXV series, which are supposedly like the more consumer brand. You'll find them more in big box stores. They don't have the 5th foot on the bottom in the middle of the chassis. Ooh, yes, Yamaha still loves their 5th foot. They still market that thing.
Keep blocking that out. I keep blocking it out of my brain. I don't understand why I can't remember they have that, because I should mock them incessantly, but I guess it's just such a ridiculous thing that my memory just goes.
Well, and also, how often do you actually see it? Because it's in the middle of the bottom of an AV receiver, so you really got to look for it. But in any case,
what is it supposed to do? It's perplexing. What is it supposed to do?
Reduce vibrations. That's what they always say. That is what they say. That's the marketing.
It's not possible.
Anyway, I don't know what's vibrating in a solid state amplifier. It's not spinning anything. But anyway, there's sort of this TikTok release that they have. Avantage comes out first, then the RXV models come out. And recently, the RXV models have been like splitting hairs to tell them apart. But in this instance, the RXV 685 is actually closer in features to the RXA 780 than it is to the 680. You're actually getting more features in the V685 for less money, at least in the US dollars, versus the 680. So there's really no reason financially or feature-wise to get the RXA 680. I would point you to the V685 for sure. Now, the 780, the RXA 780, it gives you...
It's all very confusing to everybody, but go on.
Yeah, well, it gives you independent HDMI zones. So you can have 2 separate HDMI zones showing 2 different things. The V685 cannot do that. It has 2 HDMI outputs, but they're mirrored. Like, that's it. That's the only difference between the V685 and the A780. But the A680 takes a step down to both of them, and it costs more than the V685. So out of those two, get the V685. It costs less and does more.
Costs less, does more. It's what we like around here.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not the case in Scotland. Maybe they figured out the actual features you should charge for them, and it costs more there. In which case, you should still probably get it. But there you go. If it's only $50, I mean, I don't know what money they use in Scotland. It's probably dollars.
Well, it's part of Great Britain,
Euros.
so pounds.
Pounds? I don't know. I'm tired. It's early and I'm tired already. Ben says, let's say you're watching something in regular Dolby Digital or DTS audio. Now, Nope, I'm not, because I don't do that.
You could. It could be cable, although you don't have cable.
It's-
Could be a
well,
DVD.
I did watch Groundhog Day the other day on Netflix, and it was probably in this. The picture was atrocious, but the kids laughed, so it was fun. Okay, and you manually select the Dolby Surround or DTS Neural X up mixer for your listening mode. What happens if you change to a different piece of content that uses Dolby True HD or DTS HD master audio? Does the receiver automatically switch to the better quality signal? Yes. And what if you switch to a piece of content that uses Atmos or DTS-X? Does the receiver automatically switch? Yes. Those things should happen. I mean, I guess it's possible that it doesn't, but it should. I mean, my receiver remembers, what I put for each content type that comes in.
Right.
It remembers my selection. Now, if I haven't selected anything, it'll go to whatever the default is, but that's per input as well.
Yep. Yeah, that's really the confusing part of it, and it's easy to get confused because whatever it was that you were watching, whatever that audio signal format might have been, if at some point you changed your listening mode while you were watching that, then you went and watched something else, different audio signal, and then sometime later you came back to that first signal type, different piece of content, but that signal type, and you didn't remember that you had manually changed the listening mode. Well, your AV receiver remembers, and it goes to something else. So it's not that your AV receiver is always going to automatically choose like the quote unquote best listening mode. It's going to just go back to whatever it was that you used last for that type of signal. The exception, of course, being something like in Den and Marantz, they have the auto listening mode. Now, what the auto listening mode does is it will always try to apply an up mixer to make use of all the speakers that you have. Right. So if it's regular Dolby Digital, it'll automatically apply Dolby Surround. If it's regular DTS, it'll automatically apply DTS Neural X. If it's Dolby Digital Plus or Dolby True HD, it'll do those plus Dolby Surround. If it's DTS HD Master Audio, it'll do that plus Neural X. So that's like the auto listening mode. But if you're just using the standard listening modes, it's whatever you used the last time that signal came in.
So Ben knows we've gone over it before, but if we're willing to go over it again, no, I'm sorry, we're not, Ben. Sorry. Try again.
That's what we do here. We don't mind.
On Denon receivers, the remote has 4 listening mode buttons: movie, music, game, and pure. What's the differences again? I don't remember the slight differences between movie and music, but game tends to give you the most discrete sounds out of each one of your speakers, depending on what mode you're listening in. And pure will usually cycle between pure, which it'll just do just whatever the thing is doing, whatever signal it is.
Yeah,
hopefully.
I mean, pure direct will actually even turn off any video processing that you have going on. It'll still pass through an HDMI video signal. It won't like give you a blank screen.
It'll shut off the front display. So it's got pure and then pure direct, and then
it's got direct and then pure direct. So direct will turn off all of your bass management. It'll turn off Odyssey, and it'll just play, like if it's Dolby Digital, it'll play it as Dolby Digital. If it's Dolby Digital Plus, it'll play as Dolby Digital Plus, on and on and on. But it turns off all of the lovely things that a Denon receiver can do. So we never really recommend using the direct listening mode. Pure direct is the same thing as that, except it also turns off the front display of the receiver and turns off any video processing that the receiver might have been doing. That's pure direct. So we don't really recommend using either of those things. Right. But then the third button press on the pure listening mode button will put you into that auto mode. And you might use that. That's a thing that you might reasonably use as the auto mode. But the other 3, movie, music, and game. Like, let's say you're just watching a Blu-ray, and let's say that Blu-ray is using 7.1 DTS HD Master Audio. Well, you can have the front of your Denon display say DTS HD Master Audio by pressing the movie button or the music button or the game button. All of them can get you there, and all of them at that point will sound identical. If it's just the straight-through listening mode for the type of signal that you're playing, there's no difference between those 3. Where the difference comes in is if you are applying some kind of up mixer to the signal. So let's say you're applying the DTS Neural X up mixer to a Blu-ray that has a DTS HD master audio signal on it. So you can put some sounds into your overheads or front wides if you happen to have them and a receiver that supports that. The movie version of DTS Neural X will basically put a little tiny bit of reverb into your surrounds and surround backs, and it kind of gooses the overhead speakers a bit too, makes them more noticeable in DTS Neural X, but it gives you that tiny little bit of reverb to try and make your room sound bigger like it's a cinema. The music mode will basically spread the front sound. So like if there's a sound that's only in your front left and front right speakers but not in the center channel, it'll spread it into the center channel while keeping some of the sound in the front left and front right. So it kind of spreads everything across the front. If you have front wide speakers, it'll spread it into those too. And then the game mode of an up mixer will try and keep the sounds as discrete as possible. It'll say this sound is supposed to be coming from this direction. It'll try and put it into just a single speaker. And for that reason, I tend to personally prefer the game version of any up mixers that I use. I like it when it just puts a sound into one speaker at a time instead of smearing it or reverbing it. Yeah, that's the difference.
There you go. Andrew on Twitter. So what's up with the Xbox One audio output now? Who knows?
I don't know. I'm kind of glad he asked because it made me go check. I haven't used my Xbox One in ages. It made me check and I was like, oh, okay. So
okay.
We'll find
so
out,
if he's playing a physical movie disc, that all seems fine. That's been the case from the start. They've been able to play back discs. You know, the most basic thing this console can do. They didn't screw that up. So if he goes to devices and streaming in the settings, he can go to Blu-ray and put a check mark next to the Let My Receiver decode the audio. That works perfectly for discs. That's true. But for everything else, it's used to say Atmos on the front panel at all times. That is true. If you turn on the Atmos decoding or whatever, it takes all the audio.
HDMI bitstream output and the bitstream type, the bitstream format as Atmos.
Yes, everything comes out as Atmos.
Yeah.
So, but that doesn't. Okay, anyways, I'll keep going. But now it's wigging out. It'll flash Atmos, and it'll go to multi-channel in, and it'll say it's getting a PCM signal from the Xbox One. His Xbox is plugged directly into his den, but if he flicks ARC on and off on his TV, that seems to make Atmos go on and off from the Xbox. It doesn't stay put, though. And if he tries to play an Atmos title from Netflix, he just gets an error. We're having trouble playing this title right now. Please try again later or select a different title. But that same Netflix show will play fine if he switches to Xbox 5.1 or 7.1 uncompressed audio. What's the deal? Well, I've never experienced this, but okay. So, as I was saying earlier, basically what it will do is it will take all your content that's not a movie or a game, because it seems to do games just fine, and turn it all in. It takes it, decode it all inside, and then throw it into an Atmos container and put it back out. So what does that mean for you? Well, that means that it will take all your if the original sound was a stereo sound, I mean, two speakers, it will decode that and say, okay, I've got sound coming out of this speaker and some kind of this speaker, and then it'll put that in the Atmos container and send it to your receiver, which means that it'll say Atmos and you'll think, okay, well, it will take whatever it is getting and it's turning it into Atmos so that it's all around me and I get surround sound and everything else. No, you get stereo. It has put it into an Atmos container, but now only two speakers are playing. And in fact, I have had the wonderful occasion of it being mono, saying Atmos, but the mono is all coming out speaker. So that's been fun. That's happened to me before. So the way around it is to change that setting off of Atmos and then have it do something else. And you can go all the way down if you really want to. I always want to have Atmos. I always want to have as many speakers playing as possible. Then you will put it to stereo all the time, and then let your receiver do all the decoding, and not decoding, but upmixing, and that way. Yeah, that way you will get all your speakers going all the time. And unless you get a show on Netflix where it actually is Atmos, then you can go and turn it to Atmos, and you should be able to get Atmos that way. But apparently not.
But problems, yes. As I said, this got me to dig out. Now, I only have day one Xbox One. I don't have a S. I don't have an X. Andrew has an Xbox
Right.
One X. So there might be some differences here. My newest firmware was from March 3rd. I don't know if there were newer firmwares for the S or the X models. But anyway, I did that. And when I did that, when I first turned it on, because the last time I turned on my Xbox like a year and a half ago, I had it set to HDMI bitstream output and the format as Dolby Atmos. And so when I first turned on my Xbox One, before it did any updates, my AV receiver said Atmos on the front of it, even though it was just the menus where it's stereo audio, so only my front, left, and right speakers were actually making sounds. My front panel on my Marantz receiver said Atmos on it. But then it did its updates because I haven't turned it on in a year and a half. And after having done its updates, it wigged out and then eventually settled on DTS audio. And I said, okay. So I went in there, tried to change it to Atmos output, and it says, you need to reinstall the Dolby Access app. That has to be reinstalled. It's called the Dolby Access app. So I said, okay.
Right.
Went ahead, reinstalled that.
I remember doing that too. Yeah.
Which was a little bit problematic because it was already there and it wouldn't update. So I had to uninstall it and then reinstall it. And when I did that, it got me to go through the setup again. And after I went through the setup again and declined to pay the extra for Atmos for headphones, because I don't really need that right now, then it let me set my HDMI audio output type to bitstream and the bitstream format to Atmos, at which point it said Atmos on the front of my Marantz at all times. Now, physical discs still play fine. They do the way physical discs are supposed to, physical Blu-ray discs. But for everything else, it says Atmos all the time. Now, it used to be the case that I could then go into the Netflix app on the Xbox One, and if the Netflix title was actually in Atmos, it would play in Atmos, and if the Netflix title was not in Atmos, it would say Atmos on the front of my Marantz, but it would only use 5.1 speakers.
Right.
Well, I got the error message that he got when I tried to play something that in the Netflix app says is Atmos audio. It says, we're having trouble playing this right now. But if I turned the Xbox's audio output to uncompressed 5.1 or 7.1, then the title would play all right. Now, if I went into the settings while the video was playing in the background, just hit the home button while the video is in progress, I could change it back to Atmos. It would work, but then the video would stutter like every 4 seconds. Never used to do that. So I don't know what's now gone wrong with the Netflix Atmos audio on my Xbox One, but it ain't working right, and it used to. My Marantz says Atmos at all times if I put the bitstream format to Atmos, but it required me to reinstall that Dolby Access app. So yeah, I don't know what's happened in the Xbox One. This has never worked really properly, not really the way that it should, which is, can I just get the audio format of whatever content I'm playing? It has an audio format. Just send that to me, please. No, it has never done that properly.
It does, yeah, and we've discussed this. It does just this decoding, so it can encode as it's re-encoding your stuff into the Atmos container or to whatever container it is, the system sounds.
Yes, the little clicks and pops and whooshes.
I have one friend that comes online all the time. He is my cousin's son, and he plays constantly, but he goes online and offline, online and offline, online. So while I'm watching stuff, he can blink, so-and-so's online. I'm like, oh, God. And there's probably a way to turn that off, but I can't do it. I mean, I can. I just can't be. I don't even know what my settings are on that. I've given up.
I just leave it on stereo. I just leave it on stereo, and even with it
I think I'm on 5.1. I think it's where I've left it.
Even with it set to stereo, if I play an actual Blu-ray disc in the thing, that still works fine. That works fine. That part still... and Andrew was actually saying he mostly uses his Xbox One as an Ultra HD Blu-ray player. I'm like, on that front, it's totally fine, and you have something else in your arsenal that can play Netflix. So let's not really... something did go strange. Something went awry. Something has changed because Netflix didn't used to be like that on my Xbox.
I need a device that will play, because the things I watch are Vudu, Hulu, Amazon Prime, Netflix, and YouTube. I need something that plays all those things.
Somebody sent a message at one point. I think I forwarded it to you. They offered you a Roku, so I don't know. that might
I
do
don't
the trick.
remember. If I
I'll have to go back and dig
Roku, please. email Rob again because apparently
you can email Tom directly if you're giving it to him. Tom at avrant.com. There you go.
Yeah, I love the Xbox. I mean, it has been it's fine. It does all this stuff, but this audio thing, I'm just done with it.
And of course,
I'm just done with it.
Some people have told us and the wider audience how if you're an Xbox insider, on the more advanced software that they're even trialing this thing where the Xbox does Dolby surround upmixing inside of itself before sending the signal out, so that way it will always use all of your speakers. I can't wait to see how they
screw that up. That'll be glorious.
But that's not a public release yet. So the people who are like, "Oh, the Xbox can do that," I'm like, "Well, on a technical level, it could do whatever a computer can do."
They said that like 2 years ago. 2 years ago, they said this.
Not on the public release.
It's coming, Tom. It's coming. Listen, enough.
Andrew, you didn't do anything wrong. It's borked.
Infinite Gary says, nice, expensive audio gear installed nicely, but in the room with hardwood floors, hard, flat walls, and no room treatments. That's a quote?
It's a quote.
Okay. So Rob mentioned this when he shared his opinion about Dream Media's YouTube videos, and Gary has been watching a lot of YouTube videos of people showing off their 2-channel rigs lately where this is also the case. When people are just talking in these videos, you can easily hear the reverberation, and it can be tough to make out what they're saying. You wouldn't want to have a conversation in these rooms, let alone listen critically to music. Gary can't understand it. Can we explain how this ends up happening so often? I can't, Gary. I can't. It is a fervently held belief within the audiophile community that the room it's all about the gear and nothing about the room, and the room is nothing but it's like a showcase of your wealth or your interests or whatever it is.
I mean, these are the very same people who will spend thousands, tens of thousands on speaker wire. Right. And elevating that speaker wire off of the floor, and yet they will do nothing to address their room acoustics.
Right. And and because people at this point have heard the podcast, hopefully with Lee, when Lee has so many times talked about his full range Yamaha speakers up front and how he didn't think he needed a sub, it was the same thing. I was just beating my head against the wall, going, Lee, you are objectively, measurably, demonstrably wrong. Oh no, Tom, I'm getting good bass in here. No, you are not. I don't even have to hear it to know it's not good, Lee. I don't have to hear it to know it's not good. And yet he just would not agree to it. This is why I set up the review for him, was because I couldn't take it any longer. I had to. I didn't want him to eat crow. That's not what I'm talking about here. I was just like, someone in my life cannot be this wrong this often and not have me do something about it.
Hearing is believing. It really sort of is the only way. And I mean,
that's what these people are the same way. Yeah. They're in these rooms and they hear it, and this is the way their room sounds. And they're like, this is amazing.
And not only that, I mean, you couldn't even take them into a nicely acoustically treated room with the identical equipment. I mean, it would have to be they are literally sitting in their room, and while the music is playing, you start bringing in acoustic treatments until they notice the difference. Like that. That's what it would take. But this is a long-standing thing, Gary. I mean, that's why podcasts like ours are essentially fighting against that, because that way of thinking has been around a lot longer than the way of thinking that we espouse. And I mean, the name Floyd Toole doesn't mean anything to those people for some reason, and it's like he's been writing about this for decades at this point. It's not like acoustically treating rooms is a new idea by any means, but you could ask the same question, Gary. Why is it when you go to 70-80% of restaurants, you have to scream at the person who's just across the table, because the acoustics in most restaurants are still so bad, and they don't have to be. They don't have to be at all, but
I just love it when they have all these open ceilings, right, with exposed AC ducts.
Utility stuff,
I'm like, just anywhere, just look at all that space. You could just fill it with stuff. So Gary, to give you an example, I've been to a couple of high-end shows, and one time I walked in the room with Clint DeBoer, And we sat down, and this guy went through like this 20-minute explanation of why his handmade speakers are the best speakers that have ever been. And one driver, big folded horn inside to give it bass, with a port. And, he took and he's talking about these speakers, about how great they are and everything else, all the handcraftsmanships and specifically the drivers themselves, such and such driver that's well renowned within the audiophile community as being the best driver, blah blah blah. And he takes this record and he puts it on. And it's a
Yes.
and it starts playing, and I'm like, it may have been the worst recording of a trumpet or whatever it was that I've ever heard, or it may have been the speaker. I will never know, because Clint and I looked at each other and went, "Oh no!" And we just walked out. I mean, we just got up and walked out in the middle of this thing, and they were like, "Where are you guys going?" I'm like, "You're joking." I'm not going to sit here and listen to this. This is just, I can't believe this was the buildup. You built up to this? I mean, God, dude. And they're all sitting there like, there are 30 people in this room. This is a small hotel room. 30 people in this room listening to this thing. And I'm like, and they're all like, oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
wow,
Gary, this is why we'll never run out of things to talk about on this podcast, because at some point somebody new will always discover that they bought nice equipment. They even might have installed it and set it up quite nicely, but nobody at any point ever talked to them about their room acoustics, and eventually they discover it, and it's a whole new exciting world for them, and they come and join the AV Rant ranks.
Somebody posted on Facebook, I think it might have been Audioholics, it could have been SVS, about whether or not to set your speakers to large or small. And I just flicked through the comments and just post after post after post about people questioning whether or not this was the right way. But I've got big speakers.
I only want it for 2-channel music. I'm
I don't
certain
care
that
how big your stupid speakers are. They're still not subwoofers. Shut up. All right. SVS has been holding this is whatever. Who is this still? I've got Gary still. SVS has been holding live chat sessions on Facebook. Gary was listening to their April 23rd session. He heard Gary Kubian mention that he tends to shy away from downfiring subs because they can sometimes end up sounding boomy. Weird thing to say from somebody who actually sells downward firing subs. Infinite Gary, not Gary Kubian, has one of their older PB12 Ultra models. It was the flagship at the time, and it's downfire. He's never noticed it being boomy at all compared to any of his other subs. But was this concern about potential boominess the reason all of SVS subs, except for the cylinder models, are front firing now? What are our thoughts? Well, if it's not front firing, what the other option? It's down or on one of the sides.
Dual side. Sometimes they have dual side firing. Opposed drivers.
No, I honestly...
I didn't hear the context of Gary Yakubian's comment, so it's a little bit tough.
I don't know if he was talking about his subs. If he was talking about subs in general, I don't know. There's no real reason to think that downward firing subs would in any way be different than side firing or front firing, or I guess theoretically upward firing subs.
I guess you could build some sort of large bowl in which the subwoofer driver is firing down into that, and that could change the sound in some strange way. I don't know the comments, the context of Gary Yakubian's comment on this. I'm not exactly sure where. It's not something I can just flat out agree or disagree with. I mean, any sub can sound boomy when set up completely improperly. Any subwoofer can. Right. The best subwoofer in the world can sound boomy because, once again, you can't separate it from the room in which it's playing, and you can find just the wrong spot to put it with just the wrong settings to make any subwoofer sound boomy.
I would have to hear I've listened to a couple, I haven't stayed through the entire thing for any of them because, like I said, they're always during the middle of dinner, and I just can't do it. So the only thing I might think he was talking about is, because their subs have a plate at the bottom, and where the down firing part fires into a plate that is attached to the sub.
Not anymore, though. The PC 4000 and the PC 2000 Pro, which are the current cylinder models.
Oh, really? They got rid of the plate?
Yeah, they don't have a plate anymore. It's just the sound path isolation feet there.
That's then all it is. I've got no leg to stand on here. I don't know what he was talking about. RD. RD's theater is open concept, so he can only really blast it if he's home by himself or if his wife is watching with him. Quite often he ends up using headphones. He's got a pair of Sennheiser wireless RS-160s. They're fine, but they don't come close to stacking up to compare to his Atmos system, particularly in terms of bass and the sense of immersion. He's using a Denon X3600H, which just have Bluetooth headphone output as an option. He tested it with some cheap Bluetooth headphones he uses when he's out walking and was pleased to find that the latency and lip sync were no problem. Not great sound quality, though. If he were to buy a pair of headphones for the theater, that would be their only purpose. So open, back, and wired are okay. What do we have any top recommendations? How much you got to spend, Broy? How much you got to spend? Because headphones, I mean, if I were going to buy some new headphones right now, I would buy a Hi-Fi Man something.
Yep.
That's what I would buy. That would be the number one thing. The two things I would look at is Shure in-ears, because I would like to have a good pair of in-ears monitors. And Rob keeps talking about them.
Home theater purpose, I'm not sure. I mean, you're definitely going to get the sound is inside my head effect with some Shure in-ear monitors.
Well, that's not what I was looking for. I'm talking about the two things I would be looking for is either in-ears or an over-ear open back design. Because I mean, and I would go Hi-Fi Man for that, which would be great for the home theater. And the in-ear stuff, it was stuff I would use when I was cutting the lawn or doing this podcast.
Yeah, I'm right along the same lines. My first thought was Hi-Fi Man's Sundera. Now the retail price on those is $500 for the pair, but over at Amazon they're $350 right now. Which nice. I mean, hey, that's an expensive pair of headphones. Let's not kid ourselves, but it's not astronomical. We've seen
a lot. I've seen a lot worse.
A lot worse than $350 for planar magnetic, really, really linear, accurate sounding headphones. Now. They will not have the tactile bass experience of properly set up subwoofers. I mean, no headphones can. They're just not moving that kind of air all around a room. They are just the air directly around your ears. But they play really linearly. I mean, really linearly down to 40 hertz. There starts to be a little bit of rolling off below 40 hertz on these. But, you know, that's that very last octave. It totally makes sense in a pair of headphones. Some people who prefer much more tipped up bass in their headphones will say, well, these don't sound bass heavy enough. Some people who are used to very rolled off highs or very tipped up highs, both of which are common in a lot of headphones, will say one or the other. They'll be like, these are too shrill or these don't have enough detail, but they play it right down the middle. So I like them because they're very, very accurate. That's the type of sound that I prefer. And if I want to do something to their sound, I can equalize it if I want to. And yeah, they're not super difficult to drive. Your Denon will have no problem. The cable that comes with them, these are the cable plugs into both ear cups. It goes on both sides. Right. It's not just a single side. And the cord is only like 4.5, 5 feet long. Right. So you'll almost certainly need an extension, but that's easy enough. And it's also a 3.5 millimeter jack on these. So if you get a 3.5 millimeter to 1/4 inch extension cable, that'd be perfect because the jack on your Denon is the 1/4 inch, the larger size. Yeah.
So you notice that the Denon app has a headphone EQ that you can adjust. It only works with wired headphones, not the Bluetooth headphone out. But how would you go about adjusting a headphone EQ? Is it just trial and error? Well, fortunately for you, there are... what is the website that measures all the headphones? It's headfi.org, is that right?
Well, there's Inner Fidelity, but they stopped a while back because Tyler Hertzen retired. Headroom has some, but they're also a retailer, so there's a little bit of sort of pushing you towards certain models there.
When we talk about room correction, what we're talking about in for home theaters and stuff like that is that the sound that comes out of the speaker is changed by the room in some way, or your perception of it is changed by how the room is affecting the sound. When you have headphones on, that is not the case. You are getting nothing but direct sound, and it is not being affected by the room. It's being affected, everything is right there. So if you put on headphones and say, I think that the bass is not, right at this point, I would like it to be higher or lower, moving around the room is in no way going to change your perception. It's going to stay the same because you're wearing headphones. So is it trial and error? And it's personal preference is what it is. Now, you could look at a measurement graph, if you can find it, of the headphones that you have bought and say, these headphones roll off at this point, and I would like to boost them a little bit because I think that I would like them to be louder. Or they are really flat up top, and I find that to be unnatural, so I'm going to roll them off a little bit. you could look at that and know your own preference, or at least inform yourself. But it's really personal preference.
Yeah, like I was saying, when you get a really neutral pair of headphones like these, if you find yourself saying, I would just prefer it if the treble were a little bit rolled off or a little bit tipped up, same on the bass. I mean, that part is basically just trial and error. That's tuning to preference. It's not like you're somehow measuring, inside your ears and going to some sort of, ideal target curve. It really is just tuning to preference. And yeah, you'll notice pretty quickly if you find yourself saying, the treble one way or the other, the bass one way or the other, even the mid-range one way or the other, and that's fairly easy to adjust with the manual EQ.
Carl just wanted to hear our thoughts on the small but notable revival of drive-in movies during this time of social distancing and essentially all movie theaters being closed. Nobody expects drive-ins to make a permanent return to popularity, but existing drive-ins have seen increased patronage and several pop-up drive-ins have opened. Will they be enough to keep movie theaters afloat? Nope. Not even. I don't even think there's any actual movie theater like AMC owns any drive-ins. I would be surprised if they owned any drive-ins. They've sold all that or liquidated it all years ago, I would imagine. The drive-ins I've all seen in my times have always been in small rural towns, and most of them have been derelict and abandoned. They occasionally have some that are still in operation. They have hung on by the fact that it doesn't cost anything really to run those places. But yeah, this is not going to save the movie industry, the movie theater industry. I don't know what's going to happen with movie theaters if we don't end isolation soon. But even if we did, movies are going to be. This is like we're talking 6, 8, 12 weeks at least of everything being shut down, and then the amount of you see the end credits, right, of movies. You see how many people work on these things. One of those people gets sick, and all of a sudden whole swaths of that can't happen. We're going to see weird movie releases and maybe big gaps in anything coming out. Like the indie movie scene, I feel might blow up because of just the fact that they can put something out a lot faster than these big budget things that we're all so enamored with.
Yeah, no, there will be lasting changes for years to come, but movies are not going to go away. They are absolutely not going to go away. And even when something like AMC Theaters is filing for bankruptcy, the notion that all movie theaters in general are going to go away. No, like they'll come back under a different name. The bankruptcy is so they don't have to pay their debt. They're gonna find a way to come back. When Mark Cuban is saying he's gonna close down Cinemark, it's like, yeah, he'll close it down, file it for bankruptcy, and then open up a new chain of theaters because he's still a billionaire and nothing happened to him. So yeah, it's the drive-in theaters, that is definitely a temporary thing. We are not gonna be in isolation and quarantine forever. It's amazing how in such a short amount of time, really, on a scale of things, this has been a short amount of time, how much has changed in that short amount of time. I think we'll be equally surprised and hopefully pleased how quickly things come back when this when this genuinely ends, once we actually have a vaccine or the thing mutates itself out of existence or whatever it is that does eventually end this. Just a sheer enough people got it and went through it that could be the way out of this. It'll happen at some point. It won't be like this forever.
Right. And I highly encourage you to support your local businesses, including drive-ins. So if you're wanting to go out and you're like, I don't know if I should, I mean, don't touch the speaker with your bare hands. Don't lick the speaker either, I guess would be my other recommendation. But yeah, the last time I went to a drive-in, I was in high school, and you hooked onto your window, right?
Yep.
Isn't that how it works?
Yeah.
So, don't expect Dolby Atmos and Dolby Vision. Jeremy, and this question comes from France. Jeremy says, we've discussed Jeremy's theater plans a few times now. Well, get it going, boy. Finish it. He initially sent us the plans that were drawn up by Klipsch's design service, as well as telling us about some of the proposals he had received from a local store. We talked him out of using an in-wall subwoofer, Oh, I kind of remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And also convinced him to go with the Denon X3600H instead of the Yamaha receiver model that was recommended to him, since we pointed out that would have topped out at 7 speakers and he wanted the 5.1.4 configuration. Yeah, dude, when your dudes are like selling you receivers that aren't going to power enough speakers, you need to get new dudes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's just, I mean, it's like a plumber who doesn't have a wrench. You're like, you know what? We're going to go with a different company. Just letting you know. All right, so we helped him sort out his TV wall mount, the placement of his in-wall clip speakers, which we said were a good choice since the main thing he and his wife want is clear dialogue and without having to crank the volume. And we said dual clip subs would totally be fine, but we've talked about SBS so much he decided to go with those. Sure, that'll be fine too. Well, with so many things currently shut down, construction on this house is on hold, and has given him time to start pondering changes.
Oh,
Rabbit
dear.
hole, here we go.
Idle hands, idle minds.
I started looking at amplifiers, and now I thought maybe I could use...
that does come up, even though you're
does it
joking
really?
about it. I think it does.
I'd like to get 7 monoblock amplifiers, 2,000 watts each. They also have to have their own 20 amp circuit. Is that a good idea for my clip speakers?
Well, you'll see here. First one up.
So he reached out to Kef, and they responded in a similarly professional manner as Klipsch. So he's impressed with both of them, Kef and Klipsch. So they've suggested 5 in-wall speakers from their THX Ultra series. This is Kef, not Klipsch.
This is Kef, yeah.
Plus 4 in-ceiling speakers from their Q series. The total for all 9 speakers is more than the Klipsch speaker package he was going to get. Kef included some marketing in their reply to him, and they talked up their unique Q technology, which seemed a bit of a red flag to Jeremy. So are Kef's UniQ drivers a unique innovation, or is it just marketing fluff? Are the supposed advantages that Kef writes about that things that we can actually hear? Do they justify the higher price than the Klipsch reference premier speakers he was going to get? Which ones were they talking about? The THX Ultra
So they mentioned
series?
their THX Ultra series as his 5 on the ground, and then the Q series for the overheads. Now, the UniQ driver is actually something that Andrew Jones designed when he was working over at Kef. Sure. It is their truly concentric design, not just coaxial, where the tweeter and the woofer share the same axis, so the tweeter is in the middle of the woofer. It's genuinely concentric, where the tweeter is right there at the peak of the cone of the woofer. And that's supposed to give you a little bit better intermodulation distortion figures than what a just coaxial driver might give you. So it's not unique. There are other concentric drivers out there besides Kef, but it does have certain inherent advantages and 1 or 2 inherent disadvantages, some of which can be counteracted with how carefully the crossover is designed. And the crossover design is also part of Kef's UniQ design. So it's the placement of the drivers, the materials that are used, the material that's used in between the tweeter and the woofer in that tiny little gap there, and the crossover design. So in that sense, because all of that is, of course, patented for that specific combination of design, in that sense, they're unique. And they do have some advantage. The main advantage of a truly concentric design is that the dispersion in all directions of the mid-range and treble is very, very even. It's not the absolute widest that dispersion can be. Having the woofer surrounding the tweeter acts as a little bit of a horn. It's not a full horn, but acts as a little bit of a horn. But it means that in that region where the woofer is crossing over to the tweeter, you have really even dispersion, which is sometimes difficult to do when the two things are separated. So that's a genuine thing that concentric drivers offer. The intermodulation distortion is something where you can't get away from it. The careful design of the crossover mitigates it as much as you can. Now, the real question is there any reason for you to go Kef instead of Klipsch in this instance, especially since Kef costs more?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I don't see any real big reason to do that. I mean, I'm looking forward in the questions here a little bit, and I'm seeing kind of what I imagine that you can get a Kef setup that would be a comparable price fairly easily, depending on,
Interestingly, yeah, in their in-wall and in-ceiling series that Kef offers, they jump from the Q series to the THX series. They don't have an R series in between like they do in their normal lineup. So there's a pretty big jump there in Kef's prices for their in-wall and in-ceiling models. So I think you'd actually end up either lower than the Klipsch Reference Premier package because it would be all Q series, or you end up with it being a little bit higher because some or all end up in that more expensive THX series from Kef.
Has he heard any of these speakers?
I don't think he's heard them in person.
See, this is the biggest problem I have with this. Where you're asking us to help you choose between two speakers you've never heard. And these, while, I mean, I have no problems with you buying either of them. In fact,
both are good.
Yeah, both are fine speakers. Now, are they the most linear speakers the world has ever seen? Not necessarily.
The Kefs are pretty darn linear.
If we were going to go, and you were to say, which one of these should I buy if I'm looking for the most linear speakers I can get, we would have to point you towards Kef. Klipsch tends to have a little bit more of a unique sound that's
Although
their sound.
The Reference Premier, I think, are probably one of the best that they've done on that front.
I think so too.
And importantly, I mean, this is going to come up when we get to his last question. The Klipsch's are 6 decibels more efficient per watt and easier to drive all around because the Kef THX series are 4 ohm loads and 6 decibels less efficient.
He's not sitting that far away from anything.
He's not sitting that far away, but I mean, he was thinking he's going to power it all with an AV receiver. I'm like, you got Klipsch speakers all around, no problem.
Right.
You'll be able to power those all day long. The dialogue will be nice and clear.
I would usually tell you to go out and find a dealer and go listen to some stuff, but we kind of can't do that right now. So I would make your plans to go out and listen to some stuff before you buy any of this. Even, I mean, I can easily tell you what subwoofers to buy, what receivers to buy, what cables to buy, what DVD players to buy, what projector to buy, what TV to buy, without you having seen it or touched it or listened to it or anything. That I have no problems with. Speakers are like, you have to hear them. So if you cannot hear them, if you cannot audition them in your house, I'm having a hard time. I mean, I know they're in walls, but it's not the only speakers they make. They all make freestanding speakers that if you've got a dealer, you'll say, listen, I want to listen to this in my house before you install it first. Or I want to at least come in and listen to them there before you install them. Either one would be good. But I don't know. Either one.
I don't have any problem with the sound quality of either of them. I just think that as a cumulative package, because we know some of the other associated equipment, because we know about your room size and some of the restrictions in speaker placement that you have, I still think that the Klipsch Reference Premiers are a really good choice for you in a holistic sense. And I don't have a good reason to tell you to go away from them.
So we already answered the next question, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so I can skip that.
Well, let me see here.
We just said that they're both the same, basically.
Yeah.
So Jerry was a bit surprised that Kef recommended the CI200R THX speakers for his fronts. Aren't they circular? Don't circular speakers usually go in the ceiling? Well, this is Klipsch. I mean, not Klipsch, but Kef. And they're, like we said, truly coaxial. So they are round. And I mean, you could put them in a square box if you really chose to.
And in fact, you have that option because with all of Kef's in-wall / in-ceiling speakers, like there's a CI200RR version, the second R standing for round, and that is just a circular bezel that it has. Then there's also a CI200RS, the S standing for square, because the bezel around it is square-shaped. And then there's a CI200RL for long, because it's a rectangular bezel around it. So whatever the drivers are identical in all of those. They never changed, but you can change the shape of the cutout that you make, that you install into the wall. So the model is just referring to the drivers, and whatever shape you want to cut out of your wall, they can get you there.
Right. If it freaks you out to have round speakers on your front wall and you want a grill that's square or rectangular, then you can get there. But
that's why they do
all. It's very It makes the driver that's making the sound is identical.
Yeah.
So you heard a fellow AVRant listener describing how his Denon X3600H got quite warm to the touch when powering all 9 speakers by itself. And admittedly, this listener had a receiver in the cabinet, so airflow was somewhat restricted, but after adding an external amp to power the front 3 speakers, the Denon was definitely cooler to the touch. Jeremy will also have his Denon inside of a piece of furniture. Should he add an amplifier? If so, which one? No?
If you stick with the Klipsch's, you definitely will not have to.
Okay, so there's that. But let me say this. No. Our listener, if he hadn't had it in an air-restricted area, it wouldn't have been a problem either. He had it there. You are building this room, this house. Mm-hmm. You are going to buy or build a piece of furniture for this thing. If you cannot put proper airflow around it, don't buy or build it. Get something else. And then you don't have to worry about this external amp. And if you want an external amp, you are not allowed to buy Klipsch speakers. I'm sorry. It's against the AV code. It is in the rule book. Check your manual. Klipsch speakers and amplifiers are never paired together. It makes your house explode. I'm sorry, it's just true. That's just facts.
I say stick with the Klipsch's, stick with your X3600H. Even if you have some restricted airflow, when they're powering Klipsch's, won't be a problem.
It's sitting like 6, 7, 8, 9 feet away from him. I mean,
he's 12. He's 12 feet away from the front ones.
3 watts. Oh my God! Turn it down. Nick already has Cat 5 Ethernet run throughout this house. He's able to have one 4K HDR stream plus a simultaneous HD stream going without any problems, so he doesn't have an obvious need to upgrade immediately. But he's got renovations underway, so while things are opened up, do we think it would be wise to replace his Cat 5 with Cat 6 or maybe even Cat 7? I'm going to be honest, didn't know there was a Cat 7 until just a second. Do we foresee having that additional bandwidth available as potentially being useful? I don't know.
So,
I don't know.
I mean, Cat 5, because, I mean, he said Cat 5, and
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty clear he knows what the Ethernet standards are. So, Cat 5 topped out at 100 megabits per second. Cat 5e went up to 1 gigabit per second. Then the Cat 6 went to 10 gigabits per second, but with a limit of it being 50 meters long, which is still pretty long, but not the 100 meters that the other ones were rated at.
Right.
Cat 6a gets you up to that same 10 gigabits per second, but at 100 meters, like the other ones. Now, I would not suggest that you run Cat 7, because Cat 7, while it goes up to 40 gigabits per second, once again at 50 meters, not 100, but it's a different connector. Like all the other ones are your old Ethernet connector. Cat 7 is now a new connector. It has to be grounded. So don't do Cat 7. There's no reason I would tell you to do Cat 7. You could end up going beyond Cat 5, 100 megabits per second. Like, he's talking about streaming, right? So right now, if you're talking about like what Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever is streaming, they're going to be like, maybe 25 megabits per second maximum. Like, that's going to be like a max. But if he ever wanted to send HDMI over Ethernet, I mean, that is converted and it is compressed somewhat so that it'll fit within like 1 gigabit per second. Like 18 gigabits per second can be shrunk down to 1 gigabit per second when you convert HDMI 2.0 to Cat 5e Ethernet. So we can expect a sort of similar thing will happen with HDMI 2.1. That could be as much as 48 gigabits per second when it's fully uncompressed going down the HDMI 2.1 cable. But when that gets converted to Ethernet, probably not going to fit within 1 gigabit per second, but it'll almost certainly fit within the 10 gigabit per second. So there's some argument that could be made for going to Cat 6. If you have, I don't know, do you have anything that's 100 meters long? Because that's the only reason you would need Cat 6A anywhere, is if you're 100 meters. If 50 meters will get the job done, then Cat 6, not Cat 6A.
50 meters is really, it's really
that's what, 160, 170 feet?
Yeah.
I imagine, some people have houses bigger than that, but Cat 6 will probably do it.
Well, I mean, if you like, aftermarket in particular, though, if you ran something like around the outside of the house, up, winding or trying to keep it underneath eaves and everything else, then I could see
it's
maybe getting
like
there.
If what he had already were Cat 5e, I'd probably say,
You'd
nah,
be
don't
okay.
do anything.
Yeah.
But when Cat 5 is what you have, I'm like, we might be going beyond 100 megabits per second pretty easily. That seems very, very possible. And if you were going to replace things anyway, then you basically might as well do Cat 6, because then you're well future-proofed for many years to come. I don't know, Nick. It's hard for me to say definitely do it, but let me put it this way. If you've got any areas of the house where you're thinking, yeah, there's a decent chance I might want to run HDMI over Ethernet over here, or this is where I want to for sure have rock solid, stable, high bandwidth internet, maybe run some Cat 6 to those choice locations. I could get behind that pretty easily.
Okay. So Nick is still trying to sort out his modified region-free Oppo BDP83 Blu-ray player. I think you and I pretty much decided it was possessed. He's had it for 13 years, and making it region-free was as simple as replacing one ribbon cable inside. It didn't impact the ability to apply firmware updates or anything. And with his Onkyo 805 receiver and Pioneer Plasma, everything was perfect for over a decade. Eventually, the disc tray stopped opening, so he sent it to Oppo for repair back in February. They told him it was just some hair and debris that had collected over the years and clogged up the disc tray's gears. Wow. Surprisingly hard to say.
Sounds, yes.
Yeah, 11:47 p.m. Disc trays gears. So they cleaned it and replaced any worn parts and sent it back to him. Again, with his Onkyo and his Plasma, it worked perfectly. Then, when he upgraded to a Denon X3600H, it still worked perfectly. This is him all trying to explain to us that it should be working perfectly, but it's not, and why not? And we're going to say, we don't know. So here it goes. It wasn't until he recently got an LG C9 OLED and the new mono-price 48 gigabits per second HDMI cable that he started having issues. He got the chroma error that put a magenta tint over the entire image. Then when we talked about switching the RGB and YCBCR modes in the Oppo, he tried RGB output, which worked, but then audio stopped working over HDMI. He just tried it with his Plasma again, and it's totally fine. Somehow, the C9 OLED seems to be the issue. We mentioned that he might have to turn off the HDMI Ultra HD Deep Color setting, but he has other sources beside his Oppo Blu-ray player, and turning that off screws up HDR. And why on earth would it be the audio that gets screwed up? Is there any explanation? Is there any chance the monoprice HDMI cable is actually the issue? Well, you can check that, right, by going back to that Plasma with that HDMI cable.
The same
right?
HDMI cable, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can test
take
it right,
the HDMI
right
cable
there.
with it.
This has always been the problem with HDMI, is that troubleshooting is never been easy.
But I mean, really, the thing that has changed is that he didn't have an HDR display before that required the HDMI Ultra HD Deep Color setting, or inside the Denon, it's called the Enhanced HDMI Output setting. He didn't have those things before because, of course, his Plasma was an SDR display. It didn't do HDR. That almost certainly is the issue. Why the thing that gets screwed up is audio, that I can't explain to you, but it is the case where, I mean, they even have a warning, not even just in the manual, on the TV itself, that says if you experience problems, turn the HDMI Ultra HD Deep Color setting off. Now, here's the thing. That setting is per input. There are 4 HDMI inputs on your LG OLED, and it is per input. It's not a global setting across all HDMI inputs. Your X3600H has 2, in fact 3 HDMI outputs. You could just run a second HDMI cable from your X3600H to a second HDMI input on your LG OLED. That second input has HDMI Ultra HD Deep Color turned off, and the first one has it turned on. And you program in your Harmony remote that, when you're using that particular Oppo player, it goes to the second HDMI input, the one that has it turned off. Yeah, you'll need to run another HDMI cable, but other than manually flicking it back and forth, I think manually flicking back and forth is also a solution. But if you never want to do that, and you just want it all to be activity-based, a second HDMI cable can probably solve this issue.
All right, great. Whatever he just said, I wasn't listening. After we discussed his plans for absorption and diffusion and recommended that instead of using a mix of absorption-only and diffusion-only panels on his side and back walls, he should just make all those panels absorption panels and then add scatter plates wherever he wants diffusion. Nick decided to write to GIC and ask them directly.
Which is a good idea.
John?
I am in favor of that.
That's fine. Double check us. I don't care. But just after you double check us, make sure you do what we say. John from Geek wrote back to him and explained that the very best performance in a relatively small room where some seats are as close as 4 feet from the wall would come from using their Alpha Pro 2D panels. They are indeed absorption and diffusion combo panels, and they use mathematically designed patterns to scatter higher frequencies both horizontally and vertically.
And I should just clarify there, I'm showing an image of the lineup that they have. They have one model where the slats are strictly vertical, and that is they call it their 1D diffuser on that particular model. It only diffuses, if the slats are vertical, it diffuses horizontally. If you rotated at 90 degrees so the slats were horizontal, it would diffuse vertically. So it's the other ones that I'm talking about. They have two different patterns that they call their 2D patterns. One of them affects a greater range of frequencies. It's the one that, not surprisingly, has many different sized holes in many different orientations.
Right.
That is the most diffuse pattern that they have created.
I like those.
Yeah,
they
cool.
kind of look like skylines to me.
Yeah,
you know, like when you look at them, it kind of looks like you're looking at the top of a city, little overhead shots.
And this one looks like a very sort of almost like a digital camouflage pattern.
Yeah.
And also I should note the image I'm showing just shows like the regular wood finish, but that they have 5 different finishes available for the wood, including just black. So if you just wanted everything to be black, you can have the wood just colored black, and then you barely even see it.
So John explained that the basic scatter plate add-on only diffuses horizontally unless you turn it to the side, which is sufficient if you have more space, but with a smaller space, the greater diffusion of the 2D panels is beneficial. Furthermore, he went as far as to say that Geek's own impression series are really more about aesthetics than pure performance, since their patterns aren't mathematically designed. Nick appreciated that level of honesty. So do we agree? It seems like useful knowledge, and Nick is feeling more confident about his plan, and if we are all on the same page. Yeah, sure, dude, get those.
I mean,
those sound great.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I did say anyway, I'm not necessarily going to speak for Tom. I did say scatter plates because those are the ones that literally, if you're ordering like the Geek standard 242 or 244 panels, the scatter plate is an add-on. And in the instance of the scatter plate, they actually install that behind the fabric. So outwardly, visually, it's not any different from the regular 244 or 242 panel. The fabric is still on the outside that you can just optionally have the scatter plate put inside. But I completely agree with the advice that you got from John from Geek, that if you can get the most diffusion plus still having an absorption panel behind it, that's A-OK advice by me. Like I say, you can get different colors for the wood that's on the front of those panels. They cost a bit more. So, but as far as performance goes, I completely agree with that.
Mike. At the moment, Mike has an SVS PB2000 Pro with the sound path isolation feet in the middle of his front wall. And he's using it as a stand for a center speaker, which is his SVS Prime Center. He's got a silver ticket 120-inch screen, and he's got soffits overhead. It all just fits perfectly. Or I guess it all fits just perfectly, meaning it's all barely squeezing in there. With the way the silver ticket screen's mounting hardware works, you can't get the top of the frame 100% flush to the soffit. There's a 3/4-inch gap since the screen is hooked onto its mount, but the height of the Prime Center sitting off on the top of the Pro, the PB2000 Pro with the sound path isolation feet, comes up exactly to the bottom of his screen's frame, whatever.
Yep.
Frame screen.
You get the idea.
You know what I'm talking about. So naturally, he's considering getting the SVS Ultra Center instead, which is only a 1/2 inch taller, but would just graze the white of his screen as a result. Plus, it's glossy.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Mine's not glossy.
Yeah, there is a wood finish, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be glossy.
Okay.
So could he get away with removing the sound path isolation feet? The floor is carpet over poured concrete. Should he go as far as replacing his current screen with the more expensive thin bezel? Oh my God, version. No. Why are you? Well, first of all, what's wrong with your center channel? Can we discuss that?
He
first?
hasn't even completely finished his room yet, and
there's nothing wrong with your center channel. What is the problem here, sir? Stop changing stuff. It fits perfectly. Did you not hear the part where it fit perfectly? No, dude. First of all, you're not allowed to take the feet off. That's not a good idea.
Don't take off the isolation feet.
Not only
this whole thing of concrete. Concrete is not inert. I don't.
That's
I mean,
right.
I will say it as many times as it takes for people to. People will never stop asking about it. Concrete is not inert. You can't just go and put. I mean, even with a carpet over it, which provides a little bit of damping. No, do not take off the isolation feet. It is not worth that. Don't do that.
I really think Lee needs isolation feet on his, but I didn't want to say that during the review. But sounds like he needs them.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't see any reason to do this. I definitely don't see any reason to upgrade your screen to the thinner bezel or whatever. Because
I mean, I really want him to at least play one movie and listen to one concert in an actually finished theater before he starts changing stuff again.
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
No.
I mean, SBS will still take it back. I mean, if
Yeah,
you change your mind.
that's true.
I mean, it's...
Leave well enough alone, dude. You
Yes.
worked everything out so that it fits just snug and perfect, everything in its place. And he's like, but what if I blew it up? Don't blow it up. Everything's great.
Listen, Michael Bay, just calm down with the explosions. Just leave it alone. Nothing has to blow up. So he asks, have we heard anything about how well the Amazon Basics brand projection screens perform? They have a super thin bezel model at extremely affordable, under maybe around $150 price point. I haven't, and stop.
Yeah, I don't know.
Step away from the computer.
I don't know anything about its performance. I hate it's a very thin little bezel, and I hate it. I think it's the worst thing I've ever seen. It's glued.
Oh my God, it is very thin. It's a very small bezel.
But not only that, the bezel is glued onto the material.
Ugh.
There's an adhesive. That is the worst thing I've ever heard in a screen. So I wouldn't put the bezel on, I guess, because it's basically just a little piece of trim. Yeah, that's the worst thing I've ever seen. I have no idea how there was mention of the material actually being like Velcroed to the tubes in the back that hold the rectangular shape, and I hate that idea. So as far as the construction of the thing goes, I'm not a fan. The white vinyl screen itself might be perfectly fine. I have no idea. But you don't do any of what you're touching. The front of your room is perfect as it is, Mike. Leave it alone.
I don't know. It's got a weird like corner thing too that sort of kind of overlaps.
I know.
I don't love it.
No.
I don't love it.
It's stuck on there with adhesive, man. It's the worst thing I've ever seen.
So he's got, maybe not the worst thing you've ever seen. Surely there's been atrocities in the world that have been worse than the Velcro stick-on bezel. Come on.
Nope. It's as bad as it gets. Some things might have equaled it, but nothing has surpassed it in its awfulness.
You and I are going to have to talk about politics afterwards. So he's got a JVC RS540, never been used in any way, shape, or form. Just waiting for it. It's the same as an X790 projector. We always mention how deep its black levels are, but if the projector is on, not showing anything, he can tell. Mm-hmm. It's not completely black. There's a glow. Is that because the silver ticket screen has a tiny bit of gain, or is it a setting in the projector, or was all this talk about ultra deep blacks not really true? If he turns the projector off, his room is pitch black, so it isn't ambient light. The screen goes from invisible to there being a slight glow when the projector is on. What is that to be expected? Well, yeah.
Yeah, no, no, but here's the thing.
That's a good thing.
I feel a bit bad that he feels misled by what we've been saying, because like it's not an OLED. Right? There's no projector that is an OLED where black is like black, completely black.
Right.
Every projector, including the JVCs, if your room is pitch black and the projector is on, just showing a black screen, you can see a little glow on the screen, even with the JVC, even with the Sonys, even with the laser projectors. There's still a little glow on there. It's not 100%.
And that's
black.
Normal. I mean, it doesn't block out all the light. I mean, it does. I mean, and this is why. And I know you guys have heard me say this. Somebody back me up here. I know you've heard me say this to people who are like, I'm going from a Pioneer Kuro, should I go for OLED or a projector? I'm like, OLED. Mm-hmm. Every time I say OLED. Why? Because you're going to go to that projector, and no matter how good the black levels are, they aren't black. They are extremely close to black. And you can, and believe me, when you go from a projector that doesn't have very good black levels to a projector like this JVC that has great black levels, you're like, oh my God, that's black. That is black.
Not only that, you could take most LCD TVs, put them into your pitch black room, have them show a black screen next to your JVC showing a black screen, and most LCD. So I mean, with a a really good full array local dimming LCD showing a fully black screen, okay, that's going to be completely pitch black too. But have one little white object somewhere on the screen, and you'll see how the LCD, even a full array local dimming one, it lights up particularly around that little white object, whereas your JVC projector, it doesn't put a halo around there. It can maintain that level of contrast, a little white object right next to the rest of the screen being black. So compared to every other projector, the JVC you have is substantially better. The Sonys probably come closest, but even they are not quite as good. And then compared to most LCD TVs, it's better than those, but it's not as good as an OLED. And we haven't made it that clear. We haven't made it that explicit, and that's on me. That's for not having said that. Not everybody has the frame of reference that we have.
That's right. I think it comes down to his frame of reference.
It is, absolutely.
This is your first projector, then it's very hard. But yes, just again, watch a movie and see how good the black, the contrast looks.
Yeah, once there's something on screen, then even the black bars above and below, which I will grant you, they are not completely black. Those black bars on the top and bottom of a CinemaScope movie, not completely black like they are on an OLED, but the way your eye will pick up the contrast between the lit image in the lit part of the image and the black bar, it'll look pretty darn close to completely black.
Adam. We previously discussed Adam's mostly unfinished basement plans, where he has a large open area, but also an enclosed room that's just a bit smaller than he would ideally like to have. We recommended that he use the smaller 11.5 by 22 foot room. Not that small, dude. And simply make his setup wider than it is long. But he hates that idea. Well, you do you, man. His wife suggested he could close off a portion of the open space outlined in green, but it would have to retain the option of opening it up when guests are over. So it's not going to be closed. It's just going to have a curtain around it. They were thinking along the lines of sliding doors, 6 feet wide each, so that when fully open, there would be a nice 12-foot opening. Doing this would take longer, possibly 2 years away from at this point. So he's actually more in favor of the smaller enclosed room if he can make it work. You can't make it work. We told you how to make it work. We already told you how to make it work. But the other idea...
I mean, I'll just say right away, the idea of a 12-foot opening that you'll be able to close without those massive doors rattling...
is more unlikely than finding a projector that has perfect black levels.
I mean, it could be done. You could have sliding steel doors that are on tracks top and bottom, and it's like locking yourself.
That's some sort of locking system that like holds everything in place. Yes, and with rubberized everything.
I mean, it's such things.
It would cost more than your house.
Exactly. We do have bank vaults. It could exist, but I don't think that's what you have in mind.
Like those airlocks.
That would
be awesome.
I don't think that's what you have in mind. These are almost certainly going to rattle like nuts, and I'm not in favor. I say stick with the small room.
Yeah, if this is what you're going to do, curtains would be what I would say to do, because you could enclose your space and then open it back up or whatever. And then
we're dealing with the huge volume of the open air. That's what you're going to have to deal with. But
that would make exactly the case would be, because even if you did the sliding doors or whatever, once you open those doors, there would be a subwoofer somewhere near that opening, because we would ask you to put one in the back of the room, and your wife would be like, well, you open it up and it looks weird. There's this cylinder sitting in the middle of the room now. The sliding doors are a horrible idea, and I understand where you're coming from, but once you start getting the space going in here, you're going to be like, how am I supposed to make it not rattle again? And that's when we'll stop taking your calls. Sorry. Like, pray, get us a young priest and an old priest. The other idea he has toyed with is making the smaller enclosed room into a shape other than a rectangle. If it were basically make it L-shaped at the back, it would remove all concerns about having adequate walkways to get to the 2 rows of seating, but it would mean that the stairway entrance would end up inside of his enclosed room. There would be a door at the bottom of the stairs, but to go up and down between the floors, you have to go through the theater. I hate that idea.
I hate that idea too. I say stick with your rectangle, sir. We can make this work. We can make it work.
We have already made it work, I thought, right?
Well,
you wanted it to go towards the the one wall, and I wanted to go towards the other wall. Is what we kind of decided on, right?
Yeah.
So he brought the 3-seater couch that he intends to use as his front row into the smaller space. The couch is 7.5 feet wide, so he can basically have a walkway on one side and then a small 12-inch or 18-inch gap on the other side of the couch and the wall. Getting to the back row is less of a concern since he can put the door wherever he would work best to easily allow entrance into that back row. So what do we think now that we know a wider than long setup is off the table? It's off the table? Is it still off the table?
He will not do wider than long.
Off the table?
It has to be longer than wide. That's what he's decided. If it's going to be longer than wide, he wants 2 rows. So basically putting the seats over to one side, because the room's only 11.5 feet wide, so he's going to push the seats over to one side. I'm showing the L-shaped one, but it's so you can get an idea of where the seats will go. Leaves him a walkway on the left-hand side, so he can come through. The door can be positioned in between the 2 rows of seats, basically, so easy access to the back row of seats, and then he'll have like a 2.5 foot wide walkway beside the front row of seats, and he can get there. That's okay. I'm okay with that. That works.
So what does the theater actually look like? I'm confused. Which one is it? It's the blue one?
Yeah, the blue one
box.
that's below the stairs.
Yes.
If we look at the rectangular one, it's in the diagram, it's below the stairs. That's where he would frame this rectangle. So that's 11.5 feet in the shorter dimension, so the up-down dimension in the diagram.
Keep the stairs on the outside of the door. That's
stairs on the outside of the theater.
Stairs on the outside of the door. And then you don't have to put a door at the bottom of the stairs. Put the door at the top of the stairs or something like that. Yeah. And then you can have that door right there to go into your theater. Mm-hmm. You're right where you have it, but move the wall down.
Yeah. So you come down the stairs and turn to your left, and there's the door into the theater. That's what you do.
So he's got some flexibility when it comes to how long the enclosed room will be. It could be anywhere from 22 to 24 feet. He hasn't decided if he wants a false wall or not. Dude, what? The man loves his walls. But what would we say is the ideal distance from the screen to the front row, and what is the minimum length we would suggest for the room if he has 2 rows of seats? So right now he's got between 22 and 24. I would choose 24.
Well, I want to step away from theater thinking from the moment.
Right.
There's a chance you will one day move out of this house. At that point, you want to have maximized every square foot that you can, because that means more money in your pocket if and when this house eventually sells. If you're going to consider putting the actual physical front wall at 22 feet because that's where we end up saying would be the best distance from projection screen to eyes or whatever. No. You make this room as physically large as you can. You get as much square footage as you can. If you're open to the idea of a false wall that can be easily taken down if and when you sell this house at some point in the future, well, hey, now you can make the distance from eyes to screen whatever the heck you please, but you make this room as long as physically makes sense, because, you don't leave square footage.
I guess I'm a little confused by the outline of this room. So for those of you that can't really see this, there's like it's against the exterior wall on what I'm going to call the right side.
The right-hand side is the bottom of the diagram, but that will become his right-hand wall.
And the front wall seems to be butting up against the garage.
That's right.
And the back wall seems to be many feet away from the exterior wall on the back,
because it's a utility room back there. So
okay, so there's a utility room back there. Okay, so can we just have that too?
I don't think so. I mean, but mostly where he's talking of this difference between 22 feet and 24 feet is building the front wall, the one that is party to the garage, in like maybe as much as 2 feet. In the other one where he's showing like the maximum sized, where it's kind of L-shaped, he's got that front wall going out to, as close to the garage as it can get. That's what you do. You're going to make this room 11.5 by 24. That's it doesn't. Nothing else matters there. Now we can talk about, okay, where do the seats go relative to the back wall, and that's ultimately going to tell you what screen size or how far away from the front wall that you want to be. So I'm going to tell you, ideally, I would like to have 4 feet from the physical back wall to the back of my second row of seats. Ideally, 3 feet totally fine, but ideally I'd like to have 4. From the back of my second row to the back of my first row, I want to have 6 feet. So that is now 10 feet from the physical back wall to the back of my front row of seats. Now, that's going to leave you 14 feet from the back of your front row to the physical front wall. Myself, I would probably, in a room this sort of size, I would probably have from eyes to screen 11 feet. That's what I would probably go for. Which basically means, because that was from the back of your seat to the physical front wall was 14 feet. So you're not going to subtract a full 3 feet there for your false wall. It's going to be like 2.5 feet, which is pretty much ideal for a false wall. That gives you beautiful space to put normal speakers back there with insulation along the physical front wall. False wall there, 2.5 feet in front of that, 11 feet from eyes to screen, 120-inch screen, and it's all perfect.
That's fine.
All right.
Yeah. What's the screen size? Because you garbled out on me.
120 inch, yeah. 120 inches
right.
from 11 feet.
11 feet from a 120 inch screen sounds about right. Yeah. 24 feet. I mean, so if you go with the 22 feet for whatever reason, you decide to go to 22 feet, I don't know why you would do that, but I would subtract it off the back, not off the front. But here we go. So if he goes with a smaller enclosed room, 2 of the walls are exterior walls, so he doesn't have to go nuts soundproofing those, right? You would think so, but you'd be wrong. As for the back wall and the other side wall that he would be constructing, does he have to do all of the soundproofing steps? Insulation you have to do. Sound clips, hat channels, 2 layers of drywall with green glue. If he's going to have double drywall, can he skip putting the insulation inside the walls? Or if he's going to put insulation in the framing, could he actually just cover it with fabric instead? No drywall. We've already discussed this recently too. So he doesn't have to even so that he doesn't have to lose even more space to absorption panels. Basically, what's the least he can do, thinking mostly about saving space while still getting good soundproofing? Well, you do not have to do all of the things, but anything you don't do makes the soundproofing less effective. I mean, I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, if you check soundproofing.com or the soundproofingcompany.com,
right.
They talk about how there are like 4 different aspects to soundproofing, and each one of them plays its own role. It's not that here are like 4 equal things and pick whichever 2 or 3 or 4 of them that you want to. No, each one has its own role to play, and the combination of all 4 is what delivers the most effective soundproofing. Now, I mean, when we're talking, does it have to be sound clips and hat channels? It doesn't have to be those things exactly. You can use regular good old resilient channel, which doesn't take up as much thickness. It's not as thick as sound clips and hat channels, regular resilient channels. The reason Soundproofing Company typically doesn't recommend resilient channels is because they're typically talking to contractors, and notoriously contractors like to go as quickly as possible. And installing resilient channels properly, they can be very effective, but they have to be installed properly, and it takes a little bit of care and a little bit of attention and a little bit of time. But if you do it, they're effective. So it doesn't have to be sound clips and hat channels. It could be resilient channels. That is the decoupling the drywall from the studs. The insulation in between the studs, that's so that any sound that does penetrate your drywall doesn't resonate inside the cavity of the wall. And there's no replacing that. You definitely want to have that in there, but it isn't enough by itself to just have insulation inside.
And then
there.
to leave your walls open with absorption in there. Basically, now you've got nothing that's keeping the sound in the room. Yeah. So it would probably sound fine in your home theater. But it would be a nightmare in the rest of the house. And you think about these exterior walls, and you're like, well, these go outside. So if the sound goes through the wall, it goes outside. But that's not the way it works. The sound shakes the wall, which shakes other walls, which shakes the floor, which shakes your house, which is why you can hear the bass in your upstairs attic.
What I will say is that on your exterior walls, you don't need to use even resilient channels. If you're going to have framing that is separate from the foundation wall, what we want to think about is, what is everything that is load-bearing? All right, now everything that is load-bearing, we want that to be decoupled from the drywall. So if you have separate framing, the framing that you've now put in is not load-bearing, it's just there to hold the drywall, well, you don't have to further separate the drywall from that framing. You just need to separate the drywall from the load-bearing part of your house. So you need to separate it from the foundation somehow. What you wouldn't want to do is just put strapping onto the foundation and drywall directly onto that strapping. Now that drywall is as good as attached directly to your foundation wall. But if you're putting up some kind of framing, even if it's 1x3s, not even full 2x4s, or
Right.
2x3s, if it's 2x3s, so they're not quite as thick, you've separated the drywall from the foundation wall. You don't have to put resilient channels there. But for the wall that's like party to your stairs, you're not going to build entirely new framing on the inside of your stairs. So on that part, which is load-bearing, you want to put resilient channels. So that's the way to think of that. Why 2 layers of drywall? Because that's more mass, and more mass does something that the other types of soundproofing doesn't do. Why green glue in between? Because damping does something that the other types of soundproofing doesn't do. And you get all 4 of those things. Insulation to reduce reverberation, decoupling of the drywall surface from whatever is holding up the rest of your house, more mass, and damping in between those layers of mass. Those 4 things lead to really good soundproofing. And if you nix one of them, there's a significant portion that gets lost. So you kind of do need to do all of it. But
Well, yes, okay, but you got to understand what is your actual goal for soundproofing? Is your actual goal that standing outside the door you cannot hear what's going on in the theater, or is your actual goal, my bedroom is 30 feet away,
right,
and upstairs, I don't want to wake my wife up when I'm watching a movie at a reasonable level, not a loud level, but a reasonable level, not at a reference volume, but at a reasonable level. If that's what you're going for, then that's what that's where all these decisions come in. So calling soundproofing company and contacting them and talking through. Now they're gonna, this is what they do, and if you tell them, I want my home theater to be soundproofed, they're going to lay out a plan for you that will absolutely soundproof your home theater. It will cost a lot of money. It'll take a lot of space. They guarantee you they will not tell you not to put drywall up and just leave the insulation in the walls to catch the sound.
Nobody's going to tell you that. You're going to have drywall.
Yeah. But, I can see where this is twice that this has come up recently, but I can see where people get this idea, but it doesn't work the way that you would hope it would work.
What you can absolutely do, though, is you have your drywall up, and instead of building 4-inch thick panels that hang on your wall, you can just put 1.5 inches, 2 inches of batting or raw insulation on your wall and cover that with fabric. That is, you've taken up maybe 2 inches of thickness. Is it going to be as effective in lower frequencies? No. But if we're talking about sidewall covering, which is, he's mostly worried about the width of his room, that 11.5. And if we're talking about your first reflection points, we're mostly talking about the higher frequencies that we want to absorb there. And like 2 inches you've lost off of there, that's doable.
And if you're going to have a front wall that's a false wall that's going to have 2.5 feet, you stuff that full of batting. There's your bass trapping right there.
There's your bass trapping. That's right.
Having in my home theater, if this makes you feel any better, I've got corner traps. I've got a bunch of them because I have them. The tri-traps from Gick, and they're great, and I can kind of place them wherever I want them to go. And some of them are lying down on the floor, some of them are in the corners like they're supposed to be. But the rest of my room is got like a 2-inch thick panels around it. There's a lot of them, but they're only 2 inches thick. I built them myself. They're ugly as sin. The lights are off. Who cares? Okay. I've got 1 4-inch thick panel because I could fit it. The rest of them, the room is not that wide, and I didn't want people running into them. I had 4-inch thick panels, and they were a problem. People were hitting them as they walked through the room, and that wasn't what I wanted. So, I built these 2-inch thick panels and just put them everywhere, and it worked. And it's for what they are trying to do in this room. It's perfect. It does, it's just catching the treble that's bouncing off the walls and stuff like that. The bass trapping is getting done in other ways, and it's fine.
Yeah.
So you don't have to think I need a 4-inch panel with a 4-inch air gap, and now I've got 8 inches coming into my room.
I mean, if you could, great, but it doesn't have to be like that. To give you some very specific advice, here's what I would say to do. On your exterior walls, the one that's next to the concrete slab in the garage, if you want to save as much space as... the garage one, we're not as worried. So, you know what? Regular 2x4 framing there. The concrete slab one, 2x3s. I saved you a 1/2 inch, basically, because 2x4s are only 3.5. What are they, 2 3/4 2x3s? Saved you 3/4 of an inch. But that's fine. That's your framing. You don't. The drywall can go directly onto those 2x3s along that concrete slab side, and instead of 2 layers of 5/8 inch thick drywall, 2 layers of 1/2 inch thick drywall, standard drywall. Fine, but put the green glue in between there. That's great. That's that wall. The other walls, we're not so worried. The one that's next to the stairs, resilient channel instead of sound clips and hat channels, 2 layers of 1/2 inch drywall with damping in between. Insulation inside all of the interior walls. For your exterior walls, please bring in the spray foam guys and have them do that. Dealing with vapor barrier and stuff in your basement and trying to seal that up airtight and perfectly, just pay for the spray foam to come in and give you true perfect thermal breakage along that concrete slab in your garage. That's the specific advice.
So the ceiling drywall is already up, just a single layer onto the overhead floor joist. It is not entirely out of the question he could take down the ceiling drywall if it's just within the small enclosed room. But does he need to? Could he maybe just put a second layer of drywall over the existing layer and have that be enough? Not if you want it to be soundproof.
Not if you want it to be soundproof, no.
So, again, do you care if people directly above you and on that entire floor perhaps hear what's going on in the home theater? If you don't, if the bedrooms are a floor above that, then maybe they'll be okay.
And with his question about does he have to insulate in the walls, I'm like, did you insulate in the ceiling? Because you really want to.
If you didn't do that, then the drywall should come down anyways. I hate saying that.
I know, but we know what we're talking about. An 11.5 by 24 foot area. It's not the whole. You don't have to drop the whole ceiling. The great thing about this being an enclosed room is you can just drop this one enclosed area and only drop that drywall. I would prefer that you do definitely make sure there's insulation up there, and then again, doesn't have to be sound clips and hat channels. Resilient channel will do, but we want to decouple that ceiling drywall from the ceiling joists. It's if you want soundproofing, it's got to be decoupled. There's no way around it. So, yeah, I would drop that ceiling.
You can answer this next question quickly, right? So I can.
Sure.
Okay.
That'll be even number. We're done.
Lee, not our Lee, different Lee. Lee has a Yamaha Avantage A1080 receiver. I think our Lee also has a Yamaha receiver.
He sure does.
And whenever he runs YPOW, it always labels his 2 Atmos overhead speakers as front presence. Is that okay, or should he change how they are labeled in the speaker settings and run YPOW again? Well, front presence was Yamaha's. They did height channels before anybody else did height channels, and they called them front presence, and they're supposed to go above your main speakers and off to the sides a little bit, a little bit wider is how they were. And I remember Clint had them. He said they made a difference. I listened to him. I never really noticed anything. Still don't notice anything. I swear I'm not deaf. I think I've even published on this podcast before my hearing. I took a hearing test right before I moved out of Jacksonville and showed how I can hear up to like 18 hertz or 16 hertz or something like that. So I hear perfectly fine. So I feel like he does need to rename them, but what's the actual answer?
It's a little bit interesting because so in the speaker setup, so if you go into the settings and unlike Denon and Marantz's where you can go through the wizard and it'll confirm things step by step, and then Odyssey will run and it will detect whether the speakers you say that you have are actually there. Right. With Yamaha and YPOW, you do need to do the setup of your speakers before running YPOW. It's not going to do a detection type of thing. It's going to rely on what you've said that you've got in your speaker setup. So you do need to do that first. And they only list front presence in this A1080 so you can have your 7 traditional speakers. If you turn off the surround backs, if you say I have no surround backs, you then have the option of turning on front presence. And that is the only toggle as far as that goes. They're going to be called front presence. But if you turn on front presence, that opens up a little submenu of what type of front presence do you have. And you have 3 choices. I have front height front presence speakers, I have ceiling mounted front presence speakers, or I have Dolby enabled front presence speakers. So what do you have?
I don't even know what to put.
Well, what do you have? Do you have speakers mounted high up on your front wall? If you do, then you have front height type front presence speakers? Do you have speakers mounted on your ceiling, basically overhead or maybe just slightly in front of you, but on the ceiling? Then you have ceiling type front presence speakers. Or do you have upward firing Dolby Atmos modules, in which case you have Dolby enabled front presence speakers? And that's really all you need to do. But you do need to assign that before running YPOW and choose the correct type. So it'll always say front presence, but you get to choose what type of front presence. Yeah, it is a little bit.
Who do we have left?
We have Gurinder and Jason D, Neil M, Josh L. Let's see, I put a whole bunch there because that was way more research than I expected it to be. Nathan W and Max K also did get questions that came in on Monday and Tuesday, of course, and you'll be on there next week, folks.
All right. This is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Thank our listeners of the week once again. We want to thank Fred for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and going to the PayPal donation site, as well as our 103 patrons over at patreon.com.
That's 113 with Mr. Bleary Eyes over there, but patreon.com/AVRant podcast.
What did I say?
You said 103. It's 113. And we're very thankful to all of you.
Nothing to do with my eyes and everything to do with my brain.
I don't blame you,
Sorry,
too.
guys.
It's midnight for Tom. He's been a heck of a trooper. But thank you, all 113 patrons. Thank you, Fred, for the PayPal donation that through avrant.com there.
Yeah, I don't complain much about. Actually, I think I do complain much about being home with my children. But I will be glad to get back to having podcasts in the middle of the day. I think that this just been. I would thank our Nathan for helping Rob out with his Atmos test tones, Brian for talking us up to Accessories for Less, and for Jeremy, Adam, Michael, Ryan, Anthony, and Neil for thanking us for keeping the podcast going. Thank you, gentlemen.
Indeed. I'll say the names again. Nathan, thank you for looking out for me. Brian, thank you for talking us up to Accessories for Less. Jeremy, Adam, Michael, Ryan, Anthony, Neil, and everybody else that I might have missed for sending their words of gratitude and just, helping encourage us that we keep the podcast going. Thank you to everyone for continuing to listen. We really appreciate it.
For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.